My boyfriend of 8 years cheated on me with his best friend's fiance and is now begging me for a second chance. I still love him, but I don't know what to do. Background. I met my boyfriend in college when we had a class together. He was struggling because of his party lifestyle, but I, being a studious introvert, was thriving. He begged me to help him, and I relented eventually. I hated his guts, but for some reason, he made me fall in love with him. He was such an open book too, and waited patiently for me. I didn't let him kiss me till 4 months into dating, and didn't sleep with him till our 1-year anniversary. He was my first, and I really wanted to be sure I was giving my virginity to someone who truly loved me. I didn't ask him to, but he slowly gave up partying and drinking for me, and we both found a new friend group in college who we've maintained to this day. He gave up everything willingly, because he said he'd rather spend time at home with me. The one thing from his past that he didn't give up though, was his childhood best friend, who we'll call Max. Max always hated me. I think he blames me that he sees my boyfriend only a few times a month, and that he isn't fun anymore. He also openly questions our relationship in front of both of us, and says stuff like, "You'll come to your senses eventually," when talking to my boyfriend. I told him I wasn't comfortable, so since then, he never let Max around me, but they still hung out, and I really didn't mind, cause I trusted him. Okay, so this is what happened recently. Max got engaged to his long-term on-again, off-again girlfriend, and invited both of us over to celebrate. It would have been just the 4 of us. Restrictions have been lifted in our area as long as contact and amount of people involved were kept to a minimum. I declined, which, in retrospect, was a huge mistake. Boyfriend offered to stay with me, but I told him he didn't need to, and I'd understand if he wanted to support Max, even though I despised the guy. Again, this was a mistake in retrospect. The next morning, my boyfriend came home crying. We are living together. He was still clearly hungover, so I bathed him and put him to bed. When he woke up a few hours later, he told me everything. Apparently, he got really drunk at the party. Max's fiance, who we'll call Homewrecker or HM, was very flirty with him the whole night and helped him when he passed out. Next thing boyfriend says he remembers was when he woke up, Homewrecker was giving him a BJ while he was naked. He says he was too drunk and just went along with it while Max watched. According to boyfriend, they're into the whole hot wife thing, whatever that means. Next thing boyfriend says he remembers was waking up naked next to Homewrecker with a bunch of used condoms around them. He rushed home after that. My heart is breaking right now, guys, and I really don't know what to do. He's been begging me for a second chance, even showed me he blocked Max and Homewrecker on everything. He promised never to contact them again. He also swears to not drink when I'm not around anymore, and that he would keep his phone unlocked so I can look through it whenever I wanted, no questions asked. He kept telling me how much he regrets it, and how much he loves me, and that I'm the only one. The sad thing is, I believe him. This man was my first everything, and I feel like my world is just crumbling around me. A few weeks ago, we were thinking about getting married and how many kids we wanted. Now, I can't even look at him without my heart breaking in two. This all happened a few days ago, and I've barely left the room. He's giving me space, but he's also doing the little things that makes me fall for him again. He keeps the house clean, he's been cooking me the food I like, and leaving short love notes beside it on the dinner table. I'm lost right now. I so desperately want to forgive him, but every time I look at him, I can't shake off the image of him being with another woman. I know I was never his first, but he kept promising me that I was going to be his last, and he broke it. Despite everything though, deep down, I still love him. Guys, I don't know where to go from here. I'm crying just typing this out, but I don't have anyone to talk to about this. Usually, when problems this big come up in my life, he's the one I turn to for help. I love him, but I don't know if I can trust him anymore. What should I do? Will couples counseling help? Should I just cut my losses and end it? He seems very remorseful, and he did confess to the whole thing immediately after. Should I give him a chance? Sorry for the long rant, I'm just lost right now. And now in the comments, just a different perspective here. I know you are very hurt, but is your boyfriend okay? Passing out drunk and finding yourself naked and in a sexual situation suggests he did not give his consent. When that happens to a girl, we call it the R word. If the situation is as I understand it, he was not then having sex. His body was being used without informed consent. He was being taken advantage of. Another thing to consider is, given his inebriation, it may not have even been his used condoms. Men who are drunk enough to pass out are not always able to perform, certainly not to fulfillment and multiple times. I don't feel like he deliberately broke a promise to you. I think he was violated, not just his body, but also because he trusted his friend. This. He seems so sorry and ashamed and regretful. It doesn't seem like he meant to do this, and honestly, just reading this, my heart breaks for the both of you. To me, it seems like he was sexually assaulted at least. In no way could he have given consent that drunk. I understand that it will be hard for you as well, knowing that something happened, but I don't think he's at fault here. It seems like he was taken advantage of in a drunken state. OP, he came crying to you, confessing he was sexually assaulted by his childhood best friend's fiance while the best friend watched. I get you being hurt. Your emotions are valid too, but he needs you and he needs a therapist. Also encourage him to file a report for sexual assault. He did not cheat on you. And now onto the update. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for those who gave me really solid advice in my last post. A lot has happened in the last few days. Sorry I haven't been replying to any of you, I just didn't think that I was in the right headspace to actually hold a meaningful conversation. Rest assured, I did read all of your replies, even the really mean ones. So where do I begin? Well, I think some of you would be delighted to know that he left me for not being supportive. Sucks to be me, I guess. I guess you guys were right. I am a sucky girlfriend. He's now off to be with his brand new supportive girlfriend. Nah, just kidding, but some of you would have wanted that to happen, right? So here's what really happened. After reading some of your comments, I started to see things from a different perspective. I never really thought of it as anything other than cheating, and it didn't help that when he came home to me that morning, he claimed to have cheated on me. And I guess my mind just started going to a dark place where logic goes out of the window. It's definitely not an excuse, but I really wasn't in the right mindset after he said he cheated. I guess it was after the realization that this man would never willingly hurt me is when all the anger and pain of being cheated on was washed away. I couldn't really bring myself to talk to him at first. He was on the couch blankly staring at whatever was on TV. He looked empty. I sat beside him and told him that I had no intentions of breaking up. Well, he came to life almost instantly, and before I knew it, his arms were wrapped around me. He was shaking, and I could tell he was crying. I was too. Remember when I said I felt my world was crumbling around me? Well, for the first time in what seemed like forever, I could feel it starting to fall back into place. I didn't realize how much a simple embrace can be so calming. Everything was starting to feel right again. Then we talked. He apologized again for cheating, and when I told him I didn't think he cheated, he had a puzzled look on his face. I asked him if he gave consent, and he said no. I tried to explain I guess he still doesn't realize that he was actually taken advantage of. He said the first thing that came to mind after what happened was that he cheated and was so afraid of losing me. This man, after being R-worded, first thought of how much he betrayed me instead of how he was betrayed himself. I was floored. He said his first response had to be to win me back, which is why he's been going the extra mile in the last few days, taking care of me from a distance. When it was my turn to speak, I told him how sorry I was for not being supportive. I jumped to conclusions without actually thinking about it clearly, which was pretty out of character for me. A few more exchanges after that, and the conversation shifted to Max and Homewrecker. I told him that I never wanted him anywhere near Max or her again, and he agreed. I've always thought that he was a bad influence, but I never thought that he'd take it this far, so I never stopped him from seeing his ex-best friend. He showed me his phone, which didn't have a lock anymore. He said he blocked both of them on everything, but wanted to keep the open phone policy. He said it's so that I can be sure he isn't back in touch with Max. I urged him to file a police report, but he was against it. He said that even if he was taken advantage of, he couldn't bring himself to do it. I didn't really know about it at first, but his family and Max's family had a very long history of friendship. Their mums were college best friends, and their dads worked together. Not only were the two of them very close, even their families were close. I thought they were just neighbors, but it was more than that. I didn't know because every time I visit his family, the topic was never brought up, and I haven't really met any of Max's family except for his little sister, who came by to play with boyfriend's little brother. He said he didn't want to ruin decades of friendship and would be content with just going no contact with Max. He's getting tested later today, and I hope that cow didn't give my man anything. I'm also pretty confident that my boyfriend didn't get the homewrecker pregnant, cause Max absolutely hates children, so I'd imagine homewrecker would be on birth control given how many dudes she sleeps with. Boyfriend and I came to the conclusion that Max most likely set the whole thing up to break us apart so he can have his best friend back. They used to be partners in crime after all, when it came to parties and to picking up women. I would like to point out that I did not force him to change. He himself chose to do so, but I know he did it for me, which just makes me fall in love with him even more. When we first met, he was still the playboy party animal he was, but he told me after hanging out with me for a few weeks that he didn't really feel like sleeping around anymore. I didn't really believe him at first, obviously. I've also noticed that a few people were bashing me for making him wait 1 year for sex. I'm sorry, I just have different views. I believe that sex is for people who love each other, so I wasn't willing to sleep with anyone that I wasn't deeply in love with and didn't love me back. I don't judge people who sleep around. My boyfriend has a high body count, but I don't really hold it against him, but back then, I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't just a girl he bangs or a conquest, but someone who he actually loves and sees a future with. Considering his past, I was very skeptical for a while, and I had my walls up the entire time, but he slowly tore them apart, and I'm glad he did. That reluctant yes, when he first asked me out, was, and still is, one of the best decisions I have ever made. Max's plan had the opposite effect. It's rough now, but I can see this experience making our relationship even stronger. I love him more than ever, believe it or not, and I'm sure he feels the same way. The last few days have taught us both how shitty our lives would be without the other. I guess it made us value each other more. Not that either of us took the other for granted, and yes, we are both getting therapy, both individually and as a couple. To be honest, I'm still shaken over the whole thing. Even when we cuddle, I can still imagine Homewrecker having her way with him, and I can't help but cry about it. If I'm still shaken up by the whole thing, I can only imagine how much worse it is for him, but I'll be there for him every step of the way. I know he didn't cheat. I know he won't break my heart. I know that he loves me. I know that I love him. It's hard right now, but knowing those facts makes me confident we can see this through. One Redditor pointed it out that we were soulmates, and I like to think that we are. I can't see myself being with anyone but him. Thanks again for all of your advice and for making me see things differently. I'll try to reply and answer questions when necessary and when I can. And now in the comments, I'm glad that it worked out this way. Thank you for supporting him in the end. I'm a male survivor myself. This gives me hope that we can truly start to be taken seriously soon. Thanks for updating us. I hope both of you will pull through wonderfully. Kinda scared that you'll still be in contact with Max because their families are close. Since flipping the genders, any girl having an abuser as a family friend who still hangs around is a scary thing. But as long as you guys stick together, I do wish you guys the best. And OP says, future mother-in-law and father-in-law hate Max, so he barely shows up for get-togethers. They have always seen him as a bad influence, and rightfully so. Small chance that we'd run into him in the future, and if there is any chance, we'll just avoid them or skip the event. I'm glad you managed to change your perspective, but please for the love of God file a police report. This is more important than decades of friendship. And OP says, I don't want to push him. He's dealing with a lot right now and ultimately it's his decision. I'm going for an angle that you may not have considered, because you sound like a nice person. When Max realizes his plan didn't work, he may encourage Homewrecker to file a report against your boyfriend. At this point, the reporting it to the police is for his protection from her. Wow, with sociopathic friends like that, who needs enemies? Though I do wonder how he will maintain no contact when Max's family is so close to him, and how will he explain that Max won't be invited to the wedding / be his best man. And I bet Max did damage control and told everyone that OP is a controlling B-word and destroyed their friendship, just to make himself the victim. I hope he doesn't damage OP's relationship with her in-laws. Our next post is titled, "Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend that he can't date younger and then get upset about my budget apartment?" So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first, and I had some doubts that we would work out together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing, and the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5, and the sound of the girls in the apartment to either side of mine watching telenovas till midnight, taking work calls all day, and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls, so I would never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go to speak to them or have me text them, and I said no. For example, one of the early times when he stayed over, we went to bed at around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud, and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in, and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs, and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot, young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights, nobody's having screaming fights, nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it, and I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money, and he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it, and even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, "Okay, boomer," or tell him that if he wanted to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. Am I the asshole for what I said to my boyfriend about my apartment? I don't think so at all. I think if he wants to complain about all these things, he can go to the effort of driving you to his apartment and back, and then dropping you back home. He can't expect the best of both worlds when you're not in a position to do that for him. Neither are you in a position to facilitate your own transport to his place. Also, that hot young 22-year-old is cringe. Yuck. Don't say that. Don't say the quiet part out loud. That disgusts me. Get out of here with your creepiness. Anyway, I don't think you're an asshole in this situation. I think you're doing the best with what you have, and I can't blame you for that. So I'm gonna say you are not the asshole. And now in the comments, not the asshole. Women his age don't put up with that behavior. Judging by all of the relationship posts on this sub alone, plenty of women his age put up with that behavior. Unfortunately, you're right. The 22-year-old putting up with this will become a 35-year-old putting up with it if she doesn't wise up. People wonder why the advice given is to dump them in the relationship advice subs. Many of the situations are very similar to this. Less age gaps though, where the partner is just a disrespectful asshole that communication won't fix. I don't get Reddit's obsession with we shouldn't jump to dumping people. Wrong. We should absolutely normalize getting out of unhealthy relationships. I don't know, man. I think your initial instinct that this wouldn't work out was right, But for more reasons than just age, he seems to have a very low tolerance for mild inconvenience. Not the asshole. Yeah, as someone in their 30s who still likes apartment living, I get the impression this dude wants a level of soundproofing that isn't possible, period. If you can hear people taking work calls, watching TV, and making breakfast, the soundproofing is just bad. I empathize with him because I hated apartment living. I felt like I could never live my life because I'd be a bother to my neighbors, and conversely, I would get annoyed at my neighbors when the fault really lies with the shitty landlords that built these buildings as cheap as possible and not give a single F about sound control between units. Not the asshole. Do you know why a 35-year-old dates a 22-year-old? Because women his age don't put up with his childish behavior, but a 22-year-old is more likely to be easily guilt-tripped. Good on you for standing up for yourself. Honestly, you might have a common hobby, but you're in very different places in your life, which can make a relationship difficult if you are not both ready to be understanding. Living in an apartment comes with that burden of hearing other people. I'd point out to him that they probably hear y'all being intimate, but they don't bother you about it. If you can hear that much of what's going on in their apartment, they can hear just as much of what's going on in yours. I just want to say this wisdom doesn't come from just being smart, it comes from once thinking that I was just so mature that I attracted older men. But I got carded until I was 30, and based on other life decisions, I can guarantee you that I am not that mature. Live and learn. And now to the edit/update. A lot of comments are asking if we could stay at his house. It is not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house, then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to just visit me in the city. Edit 2, a lot of people in the comments are saying technically 35 is a millennial and not a boomer. I know that. I'm using boomer as a joke, or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It's a common figure of speech to say okay boomer to someone who's acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. And edit 3, this is the update. I googled his property records for his house and he co-owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy crap. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, a great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. And now to the comments. As soon as it was mentioned that they never go to his place, I just out loud said, "Girl, bet he's married." Seriously, my girlfriend lives a 30-ish minute drive away from me and I don't complain. I dislike having to drive longer than 20 minutes most of the time. If he lived a large town over and it was like a 1.5 hour drive, I could see that as being an issue. I once dated a guy who lived an hour and 15 minutes away from me, and he would come and pick me up on Fridays and drop me back on Sundays. I was saving up for a car at that time and didn't need one where I lived. In September, we will have been married 10 years. Oh lord, the strength to not go sleuthing for the answer. I couldn't have let it go. I'd have known his mailman's shoe size, and how his kindergarten teacher takes her coffee, sugar, no milk, before the night turned into day. Yeah, I'd need to know the truth. Funny that literally the title, like knowing somebody was having this problem, had those suspicions. It's kind of beautiful how naive we all are when we're in the middle of the storm, and sometimes just putting it into words lifts your head from the clouds, and suddenly you see the storm. But I still want to throw a lightning bolt at him. Many years ago, I was so angry at a married guy who presented himself as single on a dating site that I spent a couple hours digging around until I figured out his real name, where he really worked, his wife's name, where his wife worked, his daughter's names, and their dog's name. Told him that if he wanted to be single, get a divorce and be single. But if I ever saw his profile again, I'd absolutely share copies of his profile, his sexts, his photos, and everything else with the world. The only thing I'm taking away from this is getting to the middle of the post thinking that, well, you're young dating someone old as F, and then realizing I'm the same age as the old as hell guy. I am the same age. but you know better than to chase the hot 22-year-olds. 22-year-olds have hopes, dreams, and plans like they're gonna change the world. It's like listening to a small kid talking about Santa Claus. I don't have the heart to rain on their parade. Anyway guys, that's where I'm gonna leave today's episode. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of it down below, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!